Hey everyone, we got the Triumphant General Celes banner yesterday, and today it's time to review Celes, one of my personal favorite units in Final Fantasy VI. I think Final Fantasy VI was one of the best games in the series regardless. Some may say the story is more nuanced than Final Fantasy VII, and I wouldn't disagree. I actually am one of those people who feel like that the story in Final Fantasy VI is superior to Final Fantasy VII, but the characters, or the most characters in Final Fantasy VII, they are a little bit better than in Final Fantasy VI. Although Kefka, Celes, Terra, they are all great characters, but the whole range of characters in 7, that is something I prefer a little bit more than Final Fantasy VI. But generally speaking, Final Fantasy VI, one of the greatest games in the series. So let's check out Celes without further ado. In base form, she is a classic, true magic tank with some LB finishing capabilities. We'll check that out in a second. And in her Brave Shift, which looks really cool. I feel like the sprite work is amazing on her. And yeah, in Brave Shift, she's a true Ice Emperor, much like in the vein of Seeking Nicole, Sakura that we're gonna get. So yeah, we'll check that out in a second too. So her abilities, right? Base form rather dull, to be honest, even for a magic tank, but she combines a lot of things in one. So one of the cool things is that she has a built-in Nephesite with Sealing Blade, so she can actually negate one spell. And she has an on-demand 75% damage mitigation, general mitigation. She also has 65 to 80% cover mitigation on her cover spell, which is rather standard these days, and she has a 50% magic mid. Although one should state, and you see this, hopefully I can zoom in a little bit for you guys, one of her passives at EX plus 2 is that she starts with full LB gauge if you have the LB leveled. And we'll check out the LB in a second, but the LB is a great source of magic damage mitigation. Ideally, you're gonna have this up anyway, all the time, and technically you could also do this on turn 1 because she starts just like FaZe does. She also starts with preemptive cover, meaning you could technically LB on turn 1 and she'd be super tanky. She also has that 4 LB crystals per turn, which is cool. Building her for passive provoke if you need to increase chance of being targeted by 50%. 1 Mogul Charm is enough, which is a nice bonus. She also has innate LB damage, as you can see, one-handed defender, lots of innate spirit, 100x chain modifier cap. So she actually is a decent LB finisher, as you can see, right? Just from these numbers, right? She also has 200% aquatic, 100% dragon killer. So that's cool. And if you're wearing her Trustmaster, Super Trustmaster, you also gain 100% true single wield spirit, which is also a cool bonus to have. She also has some magic abilities. Keep in mind she also has Holy, but her Holy compared to Cetra Arif's Holy is worse. And you can see that it's not Awakened +2, and thus it only the damage conversion is only 30% of magic points consumed. So if you consume 1000 magic points, you only have a 300x modifier. I'm saying only because Cetra Arif would have that 1000x modifier in that case. So it's not as good as Cetra Arif. Arif's Holy. You shouldn't probably use Celes Holy. You much rather would like to limit burst with her. So let's check out her limit burst. It's a single hit, 60 LB crystals hit with 135x modifier. And the cool thing is it's magic star, meaning it actually uses physical type killers and uses spirit scaling, which is also nice. So yeah, and this is also, like, as you can see, the 80% damage mitigation, 80% physical magical mitigation. So that is very, very strong. And I'll be honest, I'm just seeing that it's also 80% general mitigation. I calculated her damage taken with just 75%, so she's actually better off in general. I will mention that later on. And a nice bonus against aquatics, she also takes 80% reduced damage, magical and physical. So yeah, 135x modifier LB on a tank. That's rather unique. We have Snow that is in the same ballpark. I believe he's at 115. And Snow was used previously in Dark Visions, so one could make a good case for using Celes in Dark Visions as well. She would have a place as an LB finisher in an ice team, preferably. Alright, Brave Shift. She gains Dragon Slayer at EX plus 3. We got confirmation today that this is exclusively EX plus 3 skill. It's a 160% Dragon Killer buff to the whole party. She does have a nerfed, quote-unquote, version of this, life devoted to the Opera. It's a 100% Dragon Killer, but it's also Avian Killer, 100% to all allies. It also increases LB damage to the whole party by 100% and fills LB gauge by 30 crystals for the party. She also takes 6,000 damage to herself, but that's rather negligible. And then as you can see, she has an on-demand 30% ice amp to the party, some stat buffs, yada yada, nothing too interesting. Passive side of things, pretty much the same. I find it just pretty weird that she has Avian Killer as a buff, but still passively Aquatic Killer. Maybe an oversight, maybe just because I believe Nicole has the Aquatic Killers, they had to give her something else. A little bit inconsistent, if you're asking me. Her Limit Burst, oh by the way, she also retains most of her magic, I was just too lazy to put it also in. But her Limit Burst in Brave Shift is no hits, it's just really a supporting Limit Burst, 300% all stats, Ice Imbue, 45% Ice Amp, and 250 LB damage increase. On paper this sounds great, and it is a great Limit Burst, but I feel like they should have given her at least 350% all stats. We've got Nicole, Lord of the Seas Nicole with 350. We've got Aerith with 400% stat increase and fire or light with light imbue and or fire damage on her tag chain. I feel like this should have been at least 350. She really could have benefited from that, or 400 even. I mean, Aerith broke the ice on that already, so might as well, right? Not too bad she didn't get the full treatment. It's still a great Limit Burst, and you will use this in Dark Visions on that specific stage that wants you to use an ice team. Alright, her Trustmaster and Super Trustmaster. Her Trustmaster is a Materia, 40% MP and SPR with 50% Aquatic Killer, Physical and Magical. It's another one of those weird cases, right? With SPR on the Materia and killers. It's really something that Shuyu would like to use, and of course Triumphant General Celes. But most of the other units, maybe also Cetra Aerith, obviously. It has the best case for Cetra Aerith. With Spirit and MP scaling, that is perfect for Cetra Aerith, I just realized. I mean, it's good for those 3 units, but for most magic DPS, this might not be as good. You're probably going to use this regardless because it's Aquatic Killer, and Aquatic Killer is actually the rarest type of killers, so it may be pretty good, but it's really hard to fit in because it has 0 magic attached to it, so tough spot for this material, I feel like. The sword, on the other hand, is great for STMR, but keep in mind, and I made this bold in red so you don't miss it, this is Final Fantasy VI units only. No other series unit can equip this sword, but the sword is generally very good. It's 180 magic, defense, magic, spirit and attack, 50 LB damage, 250 static attack, magic and spirit, and conveniently also has 30% physical and magical evasion, which I find very interesting. And it's a great sword for Celes as well as other Final Fantasy VI units alike. There aren't that many, right? It's only the relevant ones are Terra, who still wants to use her own STMR, and Cyan, our first Super Limit Burst unit, presumably first Super Limit Burst that we're getting. But I believe Cyan doesn't even want this weapon unless you're building him for true dual wield, which I don't think is good. But I'll explore that possibility when the time comes. But generally speaking, great weapon for FF6 units. The static attack magic spirit is a nice addition, but ultimately it won't be used much due to the limitation to Final Fantasy VI units. So let's move on to the vision card. It's actually the best, or one of the best, probably if not even the best vision card for hybrid units, right? 100 attack, 100 base magic, both base attack and magic at 100. That is really sweet. 25 unconditional LB damage, 50% unconditional attack and magic. I like it. I like it a lot for units such as Starlight Elena or OG Elena, NVA Elena, I should say. It's good. It's really good. I mean, I've used Ferris's vision card so far. If I were ever to get my hands on this vision card, I might actually use this over Ferris's vision card on NVA Elena in Clash of Wills, for example. The static attack, defense, magic, and spirit is a nice bonus for those Final Fantasy VI units at level 10. So yeah, great card. I like it. I also like the sprite work. It's rather cute, I would say. Right, and now let's check out the builds and how they fare against each other. Now, I am only comparing 3 units here. It's Invincible or Triumphant General Celes. This is a JP build. Mind you, at the time of the making of this video, Celes wasn't on the builder, so I cannot really show a proper global build, but ours should come very close and not have much difference. I'm also vetting her against Phasey and Beatrix because those are the most used ones. Now, if you're asking why I'm not using Diverty, yeah, Diverty is not a good magic tank. If you still believe Diverty is a good magic tank because some guy said so, you should really question his competence. That's all I'm gonna say about Diverty. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, all builds are not necessarily built towards a certain trial, it's just maximizing spirit. So let's compare the general stuff, right? So Celes 75%, Phasey 75%, but Celes, as we've seen, she also has pretty much throughout the whole fight 80% magical mitigation and general mitigation. So this might be wrong because I feel like keeping up her limit burst at all times is not an issue. Especially because you can turn this on and turn 1, have 3 or 4 turns to refresh it. It's not going to be an issue. I highly doubt that it's going to be an issue to keep up the 80% magical and general mitigation. Beatrix takes the cake here though with the 85% general mitigation. It's on demand. It's really good. Now, Celes also has 50% physical mitigation. Beatrix has none, but it doesn't really matter for magic tanks. I just had this on just for completionist's sake. And Phasey in her Brave Shift can use 80% physical mitigation, single use on Grandis though, so I just put this in brackets because it's not that relevant. Magical mitigation, 80% for Phasey and Celes, so they are both toe and toe. Meanwhile, Beatrix rather falling behind. She's an NVA unit though, so 50% for her via Shelga, +2. Cover mitigation, there is no difference between the 3. And other mitigation, Celes has 80% aquatic mitigation, 1 stack on the left side. Phasey has 20% aquatic and dragon, so as you can see, Celes really excels in things that Phasey does towards certain types. And yeah, Beatrix, the only really other cool mitigation is that she has 1 stack of the left side, which is still very handy to have. Let's keep on. So, stat buffs. Celes, 300% all party buffs. I think it's rather unnecessary to talk about the other 2. They don't have anything comparable. I mean, Phasey has 180%, Beatrix doesn't even have party buffs. Yeah. Also, same applies to killer buffs. Celes takes the cake here easily. 160% Dragon Killer. But on the other hand, 100% Avian Killer, of course. On the other hand, resistance buffs, Phasey wins by a long shot, by a mile, landslide win for Phasey. The amount of resistances she can buff. I think she has all elements covered at 90%, and that is just crazy. Celes and Beatrix have nothing in that regard. So when it comes still to resistance Tetris fights, you're probably gonna bring Phasey unless you want to build the whole other team around resistances. So yeah, Phase is really good in that regard. And amplification buffs, Celes 45% ice amp, which is nice. Phase has that 25% light and earth amp, physical magical, same as Celes physical and magical 2 for the party. It's both good. Phase is a little bit more versatile because she covers 2 elements, though the amplifiers are rather weak these days, I would say. It's still nice to have, but I wouldn't give it to either one. I believe both have their fair share of use at the right time. And yeah, lastly, I also have Imperil Breaks. Celes has none of those. Phase has the 100% Earth Imperil and 75% all stat breaks, which is nice. And Beatrix in her base form can Imperil 122 Light, which is also a nice bonus. And here is some damage calculations, damage taken calculations. It states best own buff, but this is actually without own buffs, no guards. So yeah, this might come as a surprise because I know for a fact that many people prefer Beatrix over Phase due to her being super bulky. And I too use Beatrix over Phase just because the HP pool, so the effective health, is a little bit higher than on Phase. But when it comes to raw damage taking, Celes wins by a landslide, as you can see. Phase comes in second with a lot of difference between them, and then Beatrix comes in third, which again may be a surprise. This is not looking at effective HP, this is really just looking at raw damage taken without HP taken into account, so we are just taking into account the actual damage taken without HP. Should be still a rather good measurement on who is the best magic tank, and without a doubt it's Celes because she takes best of both worlds from Phase and Beatrix, the good mitigation stuff, the high spirit, the high HP. Celes has all of that in one kit. It's just that she's really missing those crucial resistance buffs that Phase has, otherwise she'd be completely broken beyond belief. But I mean, we don't have any magic trials coming up anyway, so whether you pull for Celes or not won't make a difference unless you're a new player who hasn't done any of the trials yet. Celes will be your best pick without a doubt. It's still rather cool to look at, I feel like, and it only confirms what we've all known so far, that Celes is the best magic tank, hands down. Alright, so how does she fare in the meta? I mean, when it comes to magic tank, I still would call her a side grade to Phase because they both do things rather differently, right? Celes is more an offensive tank, where Phase is really that defensive tank that really covers your team, buffs resistances, etc, etc. They do things differently, so I'd rather not compare them. It's apples to oranges, if I feel like. But she is, Celes that is, the best magic tank in terms of raw survivability. Again, there are no magic trials coming up. She's an awesome ice amp unit, but as you might have noticed, she has no ice imperil, which I feel like is an oversight, and we're gonna use another unit that has that ice imperil, probably Kurasame, a Neovision Kurasame that is coming up in a couple of weeks. So yeah, and her buffs, her killer buffs, are also something I'm kind of on the fence, right? Because 160 Dragon Killer, Party Dragon Killer is nice, but we have Last Gen who has 150 without EX requirements. 100% Avian Party Killer is nice, but we have Zidane who has 150, and that's better. And yeah, again, her Limit Burst buff, 250 LB buff, Nicole, Arif have that. And 300% stats is also a downgrade compared to Arif and Nicole. So yeah, I feel like she's really good, but she's still lacking in some departments where I feel like it's unnecessary that she's lacking. And yeah, but all in all, I feel like she's still a great pick, especially for that one Dark Vision stage 2 months from now. We're gonna want to have her. But yeah, other than that, she's probably going to be sitting on the bench because there are no trials coming up that need a magic tank, sadly. So yeah, should you pull? I mean, although she has the most amazing sprite, she isn't super needed. She also has no immediate use, so skipping her is probably the best option you have. I am skipping her with My heart is aching, I'll be honest. I really would love to have her just because I'm a fan of hers and Final Fantasy VI in general, but I'm skipping her because I need to save Lapis. So, but if you're still rather new to the game and have a lot of trials to do, she will be your best pick. Other than that, if you want to pull for the amazing sprite, I won't judge at all. If I had the Lapis, I would certainly pull. But I don't. So yeah. And that is the end of this review. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Sorry for being a little bit late today. I had a couple more errands to run. But yeah, thank you all for watching. Have a nice rest of the Friday evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you're from. And we'll see each other probably Sunday again for the next video. Bye bye.